Buxton Settlement, also known as the Elgin Settlement, was arguably the most important black settlement ever to be established in Canada before the American Civil War. The western peninsula of Ontario between Lake Huron and Lake Erie was considered almost a mecca for fugitive enslaved people from the United States. That part of Ontario was bounded on the east by the state of New York, on the west by Michigan, on the south by Ohio, and northwestern Pennsylvania. Southwestern Ontario was easily reachable, and during the 40s and 50s, refugees constantly streamed over the border into Canada to find freedom. Back then, crossing into British territory to find freedom from enslavement was known as shaking the lion's paw. On arrival, they mostly had two choices: head directly into the dense urban areas where they may have a better chance of finding work, or stay close to the many small black communities which were popping up closer to the American border. Now, the Elgin Settlement begins with a man named Reverend William King. Reverend William King was a native of Londonderry, Ireland. He eventually settled as the rector of a college in Louisiana. As the story goes, Reverend King was morally opposed to slavery, but while in Louisiana, he became, through marriage, owner of 15 enslaved people, with an estimated value at the time of $9,000. But due to the laws of the time, he was powerless to free them, so he had them working on a different plantation, and he refused to take any money from what they earned. He had them keep their own wages. Before long, he took the opportunity to leave Louisiana and go to Canada, bringing his 15 enslaved people with him. According to the laws of Canada, this means that they immediately became free men and women right as they crossed the border. They all moved to Canada around the same time that the Fugitive Slave Bill was passed in the United States. This new law meant that no one was safe, and any enslaved person could be returned to their so-called owner, even in a free state. Predictably, this increased the amount of people who were crossing the border into Canada to find freedom. According to Reverend King's Christian beliefs, he felt almost obligated to take care of the formerly enslaved people. He felt a sense of responsibility for them and felt that he had to do something to help change the trajectory of their lives. Putting aside if we think his attitude towards them was the right one, Reverend King didn't waste any time. He immediately set about trying to make an effort to secure a piece of land so that the formerly enslaved people could begin to have their own community. The first time they did this, they made an application before the Executive Council of the Canadian government. This was in September 1848. They were not successful and did not receive any land. They would soon try again. The second time around, they took a different approach. They formed a non-sectarian body association, and they called it the Elgin Association. The Elgin Association was legally incorporated for the purpose of purchasing crown or clergy reserve lands in the township of Raleigh and settling the same with colored families resident in Canada of approved moral character. Pay close attention to that idea of moral character. It's a recurring theme in the story, and it's often one of the ways that people use to judge the success of the Elgin Settlement later on down the line. Now, securing the land would not be easy. There was strong opposition to the project in Kent County. Once people found out the plans of the Elgin Association, they condemned it. In Chatham, the county town, they called meetings of protest. A resolution was passed that objected to selling any of the public land. One of the people who most staunchly opposed the plans of the Elgin Association was a man called Edwin Larwill, Member of Parliament for the County of Kent. He vigorously opposed any plans to settle anyone who was not white in the area. Eventually, he was called to account for his action, and resolutions were instituted, forcing him to retract and step down from his aggression. Opposition to the project failed to stop its progress, and eventually, with the help of Lord Elgin, who was then the Governor General of Canada, they received 9,000 acres to begin the development of one of Canada's premier black communities for former enslaved people. This 9,000 acres was to the south of Chatham and within a mile or two of Lake Erie, Ontario. Each of the settlers was allowed to get 50 acres each at a price of $2.50 per acre. They had 10 years to pay for the land in total. But make no mistake about it, this is raw land. The land had never been settled before and had no roads, no infrastructure, nothing. The good thing was that the ground was level, but it was heavily treed, timbered with oak, hickory, beech, elm, and other heavy trees. The soil in that area of southwestern Ontario was a deep black loam, extremely fertile and rich. Their first major task would be to clear the land. The third annual report from the year 1852 showed that they had cleared 350 acres of land and 204 acres were under cultivation. By 1857, after 7 years, more than 1,000 acres had been completely cleared. There was an additional 200 acres where the trees had been felled and the land was ready to be put under cultivation. This relatively fast pace of clearing allowed them to make the best use of the land. The motto in the settlement was work or sink. Driven by that vision, they worked tirelessly day and night to turn the settlement from an unsettled piece of land in southwestern Ontario to a place they could call home. After clearing the land, their priority turned to the establishment of schools. Education was seen as one of the best ways that the settlement could contribute to the future of the children who grew up in the community. Reverend King had a vision for their education which went beyond the basic subjects that were taught in the so-called common schools at the time. Individuals in the settlement also received education in the classics and in higher branches of literature. It's important to note that the school was also self-sustaining. It didn't depend on charity. For example, in 1866, all the settlers of the Elgin Settlement put together $1,000 specifically as the budget for educational purposes, simply out of the industry of their hands and the businesses that they had created at the Elgin Settlement. The Elgin Settlement also became over time known as a source of great mechanics, great tradesmen, and a great source of raw materials for industry in 1800s Canada. One person who visited them in the 50s says, and I quote, "The best county tavern in Kent is kept by Mr. West at Buxton, which is the Elgin Settlement. Mr. T. Stringer is one of the most enterprising tradesmen in the county, and he is a Buxtonian, a colored man. I broke my carriage near there. The woodwork as well as the iron was broken. I never had any better repairing done to either the woodwork or the ironwork of my carriage. I never had better shoeing than was done to my horses in Buxton in February 1852 by a black man, a native of Kentucky. In a word, the work was done after the pattern of Charles Peyton Lucas. They are blessed with able mechanics, good farmers, enterprising men, and women worthy of them, and they are training the rising generation to principles such as will give them the best places in the esteem and the service of their countrymen in some day not far distant." Due to the hostile conditions created in the United States because of the passing of the Fugitive Slave Act, people were coming to Buxton every single year. By 1855, a saw and grist mill was erected in Buxton. This unlocked a whole new stream of revenue for the residents of the Elgin Settlement because they had an abundance of excellent timber. Not only did they have enough timber to build their own homes, but also excess to supply the markets at the time. In 1856, they added a yard for making bricks and a pearl ash factory. Also, they added a store, a 2-story brick hotel, and a good frame house that was intended to be a private boarding house available for the use of anyone visiting the Elgin Settlement. They also unlocked additional streams of revenue by selling the byproducts of the wood milling process to manufacturers of potash. Canada, to this day, is a great manufacturer and distributor of potash. Now, it's one thing for you to know that you are self-assured, smart, confident, and self-sufficient. It's a whole other issue, though, to get other people to acknowledge that. To a large degree, onlookers gauged the success of the settlement not based upon their level of education, but just the degree to which they could take care of themselves. It was commonly believed back then that black people could not be left alone to their own devices, or else they would destroy themselves. The Elgin Settlement destroyed this concept, not because they knew they were being watched and they decided to overcompensate, but because for the first time they were given an equal opportunity. Their children were educated and they were sufficiently rewarded for their hard work, thus motivating them to work even harder to secure their own independence. If you think about it, the very idea behind the Elgin Settlement is kind of questionable in and of itself. If Reverend King hadn't felt the desire and a sense of personal responsibility for the former enslaved, he might have let them go and live their own lives. But to some degree, he wanted to be sure and to demonstrate to others what he already felt and knew to be true, which is that if you remove the unfair obstacles, black people are as much self-starters and self-directed, self-sufficient, intelligent people as anybody else. Without knowing that they were in many ways kind of an experiment, the settlers demonstrated that the spirit of industry resided in them just like anybody else. Dr. R. Samuel Howe came to Canada for the Freedmen's Inquiry Committee. Here are his thoughts on the Elgin Settlement. "Buxton is certainly a very interesting place," he wrote. 16 years ago, it was a wilderness. Now, good highways are laid out in all directions through the forest, and by their side, standing back 33 feet from the road, are about 200 cottages, all built in the same pattern, all looking neat and comfortable. Around each one is a cleared place of several acres which is well cultivated. The fences are in good order, the barns seem well filled, and cattle and horses and pigs and poultry abound. There are signs of industry and thrift and comfort everywhere. Signs of intemperance, of idleness, of want nowhere. There is no tavern and no groggery, but there is a chapel and a schoolhouse. Most interesting of all are the inhabitants. 20 years ago, most of them were slaves who owned nothing, not even their children. Now they own themselves. They own their houses and farms, and they have their wives and children about them. They are enfranchised citizens of a government which protects their rights. The present condition of all these colonists as compared with their former one is remarkable. This settlement is a perfect success. Here are men who were in slavery, who came here and purchased land at the government price, cleared it, bought their own implements, built their own houses after a model, and have supported themselves in all material circumstances, and now support their school in part. I consider that this settlement has done as well as a settlement would have done under the same circumstances. Similarly, writing in February 1866, Reverend King said, "Clement is a standing protest against the charges brought against the Negro of idleness and incapacity to manage his own business. Just at this critical period in the reconstruction of the slave states and the settlement of other questions connected with the freedom of the slave, it is well that we have at least one community of freedmen, of whom it can be said that they are self-supporting and industrious. While enjoying all the rights of freemen, they are well behaved and exercise their civil rights with as much judgment as any other settlers coming into the province. Today, the thermometer stands 5 degrees below zero, with snow a foot deep, and yet there is not an able-bodied man in the settlement who is not in the woods with axe and crescent saw, making staves for the foreign market and taking saw logs to the mill. There is a high price for timber and staves. This is the motive to exertion, and all are busy. The mill this year will deliver 500,000 feet of timber at the end of the center road, which is now completed to the lake, and in summer is one of the loveliest drives in the West. From the middle road to the lake is a straight, wide avenue with the primitive forest trees of stately growth on each side. At the end of the avenue, Lake Erie bursts upon the view in all its majesty. The opening up of this road has given a new impulse to the industry of the settlers, as it has given them access to a ready market for any amount of staves, firewood, lumber, etc. The settlement never has been in a more prosperous condition than it is this year. Over time, the model of success began to decline. Time brought change, and new opportunities opened up in Canadian cities and also American cities. The descendants of the original settlers started to leave Buxton behind to seek opportunities in more urban areas like Windsor, Toronto, Detroit, and even further south in the United States. While the town itself remained, its role as a major black settlement hub began to fade over time. You see, the Elgin Settlement is more than just a historical footnote. It's a testament to the power of self-determination. The kind of people who settled there were buzzing, permissionless self-starters who didn't need to be watched or told what to do. They left their mark on Buxton, and there will never be another place like it.